you come in late on June's talk, she will make you. I have many more things to worry about, sorry. Serena was going to, she said she was going to come back in. Oh, out that way. Okay, everybody, if you could take your seats, please. Move back in as quickly as possible. I'll have to come see you a little bit later. Okay. Now, see? Nobody getting a break for the rest of the day. I say 2 minutes. Black women got to stretch it out like I mean 8. So anyway, we will have some others joining us, but of course, what we don't want to do is keep people waiting. We've got many people joining us online. And it's important, obviously, to kick us off, to hear from the woman who's made all of this possible. Certainly a woman who needs no introduction, but of course I do want to say a few words about June Oscar. It's been an absolute pleasure to, as I said, co-host this event with June. There's been many robust conversations, big ideas, recognising also some of our limitations, but the incredible work of digging in, of the perseverance of hearing from all of those voices, and the incredible work that she has done over the last 5 years as Social Justice Commissioner. I think we can all acknowledge June for that contribution, and in saying that, I'd also like you to welcome June Oscar to the stage.
Well, it's going to be a long day. Jalanguru maningare, Wiyi Yani, palangare wat kiregale, jarandenge, ngandaji moy, berango, ngano aliano, ngambriano. Hello and welcome to this first of a kind gathering in Australia. The Wiyi Yani U Thangani Women's Voices, We Are the Change National Summit. Held here on the beautiful Ngunnawal and Ngambri lands. I pay my respects to all Ngunnawal and Ngambri elders and those who are emerging. And we had the pleasure of meeting some of those young people yesterday and this morning. Thank you, Dr. Matilda House and Serena Williams, for the generous welcome, and to the fantastic dance group from here, Yukonbrook Dance Group. What a welcome, what a morning, and what an audience. How good it feels to be in this space with all of you, incredible women, 900 of us, First Nations women and non-Indigenous women together. A complete sellout summit. Look, we all know it's certainly cold out there in this majestic country surrounded by the Brindabella, but already the energy and enthusiasm from everyone is warming this place up, along with the beautiful smoke from this country. That medicine is so good for us. Standing here looking out at you all, I'm a little bit overwhelmed by the enormity of the occasion, the emotion of life, lifelong friends and family uniting, and the possibility of what we can achieve at this summit. I know so many of you, Indigenous and non-Indigenous women, who have shaped my life. Some of you from the earliest parts of my life, and then midway through, one of those being Dr. Matilda House, who I first met when I was 28 years old, when I was a young woman, learning how to walk with courage in this world. Dr. Matilda, you remain as commanding, caring, and gracious as the first day I saw you, all those decades ago. Forever a mighty matriarch of this country with that jet black hair, which is beautiful and silver, full of wisdom now. And for those of you I haven't had the pleasure of meeting, I know this room is filled with relationships and we are all connected. So let me begin by saying, Ngelamunga nenge, jibere nenge, berega nenge, ngiamunga nenge. Jinyere nenge karwa, jilji moai, madawara nenge, wurnam nenge. What grey gala ngada jo moai, birango, ngambri yano, nganawal yano. Yadawara, Wuralawara, Winyawara, Jalongurungara Goda. I say to you all that we come together on these sacred lands from the many directions and regions and countries of this continent. Saltwater country, desert, sandhill country, river country, range country, high hill country. We have travelled from the islands of the Torres Strait, the beating heart of our fiery centre, and the warm salt waters of the tropics, from the rolling sandhills, the high mountain passes, and the rocky ranges, and the deep valleys, and ancient forests, and from bountiful river countries. Our diversity is great and wonderful. Whether we are from urban or remote Australia, we share a vibrant and living history that means we have a powerful collective voice. We rise with a voice that comes from the grounds we stand on, full and rich with wisdom, knowledges, stories, songs and laws of our ancestors, interconnecting us all from one far reach of this continent to the other. Look around you. Look at the power that resides in this room today. And for this opening, I really do want you to take a moment to see one another, because today is all about our connections. If you could turn to the woman beside you, look at each other, feel each other's presence and the strength, positive energy that is filling the space around you. Do the same for the woman in the rows below and above. In seeing each other, take the time to truly acknowledge and honour the stories you all carry and the lives you live. And while you are doing that, remember, none of us have come from nowhere. As First Nations women, we are born from the most remarkable lineage. Our ancestors, the first mothers of this continent, who have walked this land since the world came into being and have birthed and raised centuries of our people into existence. That's just so powerful when we think about ourselves in that way. I want you to bring their spirits into this room today and the rest of the days of the summit. All those women who are not physically here, but reside in our hearts, who make us who we are. Our grandmothers, aunties, mothers, sisters, daughters and granddaughters and great-granddaughters, and our friends. And all those who have blessed us with their presence and graced us, our lives. Far too many for too short a time, but their beautiful souls have left an undeniable impression. They are us, and they are with us always. These millions of lives, spirits and stories, weaving us together across the ages, have formed and created our connections today. This is our collective sisterhood. And without question, it includes our sister girls and trans sisters and all women who stand with us in genuine collaboration. I want to quickly touch upon my own recent story, which I know holds truths shared by many of you in this room. Last year, in the last 2 months of my mother's life, my great-granddaughter, Raisha, was born. For a brief period, 5 generations of women lived on this earth. A complete cycle, the past, the present, and the future, all joined. Through my mother, I could reach back into my Mimi, my grandmother's footsteps, how she travelled over the precipice of a turbulent and violent change and survived. She was uncompromising, my Mimi, in a new era, never letting go of our language and knowledges, traversing and speaking with our country educating all the young ones, including me. Simultaneously, I can see what's to come. In the smiles and laughter of my great-granddaughter, hungry to learn about all that surrounds her with enthusiasm and without fear, she says hello to everyone, including all animals, the trees and the stars. We were flying into Sydney the other night and she saw the house lights and she said they were all stars. From the beginning to the end of life in my mother and great-granddaughter, I could see how all our knowledges are constantly regenerated in endless cycles of intergenerational love, care, responsibility, and creativity. In the last hours of my mother's life, she slept peacefully. Her hands softly crossed on her stomach, and my brother, two of my brothers were there, Patrick and Kevin, looked at them and said, "How many barramundi those hands have caught?" I thought, how many meals have these hands prepared? How many times they've embraced, held, and comforted others. And now I think of all our women's hands that have raised children, worked, crushed seeds and kneaded dough, rubbed medicine into skin, fought at the front line of invasion, and held our babies close, ensuring that they would become us. When I started Wiyi Yani U Thangani, it was with the image of our women's hands in mind, holding the fishing lines and the digging sticks, tilling the earth, tending to the soils of our homes, the foundation of all our existences, the foundation of Australia. Since a young age, living and then working with my old people and being raised by my grandmother and mother and my older sister, my Mane, Walbagbia, I've always known how much of our women's lives and knowledges have mattered to creating and maintaining healthy societies and caring and connected families and kinship structures. In 1986, I was in Fitzroy Crossing when the Women's Business Task Force, funded by the then Federal Department of Aboriginal Affairs, travelled through to listen for the first time ever to the stories of our women. And I want to mention Rangan Irene Davey, who's here today. Rangan, along with the late Glenys Sibasado, who conducted the engagements in the West Kimberley through the department. I also want to acknowledge Rhonda Radney, Professor Marcia Langton, and Jackie Huggins, who are all involved in the Women's Business Task Force. Jackie Huggins, my good friend, who will be delivering a keynote on Thursday. You're a major support in delivering the Wiyi Yani U Thangani engagements in 2018, and we cherish your wise advice to us. The task force at the time captured my imagination and affirmed my belief that our work at the community level, that our women's work and lives are important, not just to our local area, but to broader Australian society, and I believe to the world. Since then, even with the vital work of the Women's Business Task Force, our women have not been effectively heard or recognised within Australia. Those who have written policy, formed the structures of this nation state, and mainstream non-Indigenous historians have either ignored us, failed to consider us, or refused to include our names, our stories, and actions in the deep history of this continent and the making of the Australian nation. There has never been an excuse for our absence. We have never been, and we are not, invisible or silent. This was and is the point of the Wiyi Yani U Thangani project, to make the presence of our women, our lives and worth undeniable. In the Wiyi Yani U Thangani report and supporting documents, including the implementation framework, we have put forward the substantial evidence that our women are pivotal to societal, economic and ecological cohesion and the central drivers of social change. Throughout 2018, as we travelled the continent, well over 2,000 women of all ages and from all spaces sang out that we are doing it all with minimal or entirely inappropriate external supports. We are working, caring for country, children, elders, people with complex needs, while confronting and surviving seemingly unsurmountable systemic challenges like collective intergenerational trauma and addiction, poverty, suicide, family violence, and intersecting discriminations. Always, though, women spoke with the knowledge that our millennial-old systems of interconnected kinship, safety, care, love, and health, which have withstood the test of time, is where we draw strength and confront and overcome these challenges. It is the systems imposed on our peoples, made by those who do not know our lives, that are broken. That attempt to break our systems that work and are fundamentally breaking the health of the planet all around us. It is these words, this evidence, your stories, that form the pages of the Wiyi Yani U Thangani report. But you didn't just want to tell your stories. You said you wanted change. Serious, systemic change and structural reform. And you said that change is going to come from us. Hence, we are the change. So in the report, we set out a pathway for structural change, grounded in our self-determination. Firstly, we wrote in the report that there would be a summit in the nation's capital, where, as a collective, we would collaborate with one another and government, policymakers, and those in positions of influence. Pardon me. Then we call for a national framework for action to respond to the rights and lives of our women and girls and drive intergenerational well-being. And lastly, a First Nations Women and Girls Advisory Body. After hundreds of ongoing conversations, we've gone further than an advisory body and are in the process of establishing a First Nations Gender Justice and Equality Institute. Which makes me feel so proud of us all that I can say for certain we are well on that pathway for structural change. Here at the summit, the discussions, the presentations and the workshops will inform what our collectively owned framework for action will look like and what the priorities of the Institute will be. These pieces of work has never existed in this country. There are so many incredible solutions that our women hold in our hands, spanning all interconnected aspects of life, from the deep knowledge of childbirth and child rearing to creating healing models on country and transforming the education system. I won't go on because you'll hear it directly from women in the sessions yourselves. Nothing like this has ever existed in Australia, as I said, and it is a direct response to what our women and girls have called for. A framework and an institute owned by us, for us, that elevates our strengths, holds our truths, sets out our actions for nationwide structural reform to help develop the systems that will work for us and support our lives and rights on the ground. Remember, this is so much more than a moment, an event. It is an historic gathering that will become a part of our individual and common histories. Our actions this week will create the summit statement and define the next steps as a movement for First Nations gender justice and equality in Australia. So I encourage you to build the connections, to collaborate, to share and learn and celebrate and reach out to find the relationships that will be part of this movement. This is a movement that is awakening the force of change through our collective strengths. How good is that? Before I hand back over to my fabulous co-host, the incredible Michelle Deshong, who has brought so much of her own talents and time to making this summit happen, I want to finish by emphasising that this summit and the journey onward belongs to you all, to each and every one of you. We are all here because of your voices, and the rest of the week will be shaped by your words, your ideas. So many of you are speaking and showcasing the incredible initiatives that are underway in many different communities, which are set to reshape our systems for the better. Remember, none of us can go it alone. I never wanted to stand in this role as the Social Justice Commissioner by myself. I always wanted to stand with you all, and I can't thank you enough for all you do and have always done, for showing up and for being here. Lastly, I want to speak directly to our young women. I have my own daughters and granddaughters here, and I've had fathers and mothers reach out to say their young ones are here too, and how proud they are of you. I listened to the youth gather yesterday, and you are all so brave, courageous, and strong. Over the next 3 days, I want you to see yourselves for the resilient, wise, incredibly intelligent and knowledgeable women that you are. You are everything that you need to be. And don't let the world tell you that you're any less. In your hands, you hold the past, you hold the present and the future. They are hands of a custodian of this continent. And at this vital point in history where everything we do matters, you are going to use those hands to mould the world into what it needs to be. And every woman here is going to unite, rise up with you, and make sure that happens. We are going to make history this week. Just pause for a moment and reflect on that truth. And we are going to do it together. We're doing it together because we are all connected. Because we are the change. Yaninja? Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, this is no small feat, but I think I'm up for the challenge. Thank you once again, June, for those powerful words. Thank you for the heartfelt stories of you sharing some of those insights into your life. And in particular, thank you for your leadership and your tenacity that has brought us this far. I've really appreciated you being a part of my journey. So, of course, everybody, I want to firstly acknowledge the wonderful Auntie Matilda House. Even though she is a doctor, she's always going to be my auntie. She's my auntie because I moved here when I was about 18, came all the way from North Queensland. I moved in February thinking that it wouldn't be cold. You know, I barely had a job, let alone a place to stay. But there were a couple of things that made this place home. And in particular, it was the warmth and generosity of the House and Williams family, who took me in very early on, who gave me a safe space, and who also created what I would call my second home. It's never lost on me when I visit Canberra about how important this place is. In many ways, it probably shaped a little bit more of my political story. And I guess the other thing is that regardless of how many times I come back here, how old I may be, there is a way in which Auntie Matilda can ground me like I'm 5 years old. And I take it on the chin and she goes, you know, I can do that. I'm like, I know. But again, it is always wonderful for her to be here and to welcome us with open arms to her country, and to recognise the powerful relationship that she has forged with many people in this room. So thank you again, Auntie Matilda. As I mentioned yesterday, I'm a Kuki-Yalanji woman, but I'm born and raised on the lands of the Walkarookabar and Bindal people. Townsville has been my home. It was the place that shaped me. And as I think about my own childhood, it was an important time in my life to recognise what inevitably would be the path that led me to be here today. It was an important era in the late 70s and 80s as I recognised the values that were being instilled in me, the values that came from my parents. I know that for many people they come from mixed relationships. And so I had an Aboriginal father and a non-Indigenous mother. And one can only imagine the turmoil that they were being faced with in the late 60s and 70s, living in regional Australia and trying to get acceptance in a country that wasn't ready for them. And then to be born into that family and to be raised in that community was at times difficult. I remember many of those early childhood stories, the way that people would look at me when I was out with my white mother, the assumptions people would make about being adopted, the looks, the glances and the commentary that I think that everybody in this room could probably share at some point in your life, between the subtlety and the overt racism that has been a part of shaping who we are. But despite all of that, The other thing that reminds me of my place, of those early days, is that growing up in Townsville was important because of the people who were around me. Not only from my parents, but if anybody knows North Queensland black politics, you know who I'm talking about. They are the leaders and the activists and the agitators. They are the people who didn't stay silent in the face of adversity. They are the people who would come to our kitchen table and I'd be hearing all of these big yarns, also recognising, you know, the tremendous moments that were playing out right there in my childhood home. It will surprise nobody in this room that there were tables I was not supposed to be at. You know, when them parents go, hey, your kid's got to get away from this table here now, stop listening in. And I'd only move about 30 centimetres down the hallway, just make sure I could still hear them yarns, right? Because that was the stuff that was exciting. That was the stuff that was really interesting to me, and perhaps is also the stuff that is the point in time where I know my political seed was sown. It was of those people in my life and around me that became the important people who would shape the rest of my life. Some of them are still in it today, and sadly, some of them have passed long ago. But, you know, that's also where I became that stubborn black child. I know it's very hard to believe. But I was taught never to be silent. I was taught to speak out, and sometimes that also meant people would stitch me up too, you know. You ever been in a room full of people going, nah, this is no good, you know, somebody should say something. Well, guess who was the one that wanted to say something? And then I'll be like, yeah, I'll say something, he's right, you're going to be behind me? And they're like, yes, sis, you do that. And then leave me standing there, one out, you know. But that's okay, because I feel like those moments are the growth moments, but also it's the stuff that I check for myself at the end of the day in asking, did I stay silent or did I speak up when I needed to speak up? And I can absolutely say that on most occasions I did exactly that. It's probably why half the women in this room will know, they go, what you been up to? I said, no, not much. They go, yeah, right, eh? Whatever you reckon. But it also is important for me to recognise, what does it mean to stand here as a black woman? Who am I? What are the things that have shaped me? Who are the people that are shaping you at this very moment? And who are the people you are influencing for the next generation? I know that there have been times in my life that I didn't feel like I could own the space, that I wasn't quite as confident as I needed to be. And so that became a process. But I can be confident now that in the last 20 years, it's been very difficult to shut me up. So, as June mentioned, this is a historical moment. This is absolutely amazing. I have benefited from being in Indigenous affairs for probably close to 30 years now, and there's a few of these moments that I can look back on, but this one is something a little bit more special. The older I get, the more conscious I am of time, of place, of mortality, that we don't have an infinite amount of time, but we do have the responsibility to ensure that we make the best of it. And I do that every single day. I know that we will never be back here in this moment, and so we must honour all that have come before us. The ones that are still here, the ones that have paved the way, the ones that have been the most resilient people through our lives, and the ones that have created these pathways that 20 or 30 years ago we couldn't have really imagined to be able to facilitate this space. But equally, we need to recognise that this is about gender justice, gender equity, and gender equality. We must remind ourselves of the complexity of these issues, This is more than just being the black woman in the room. This is about identifying the complexities to gender equality and the challenges that we still have yet to face in terms of changing that narrative in this country to include us instead of exclude us. And that is what we are here to do over the next few days. We must also recognise that in a room full of this, even though we're all strong, deadly black women, that we all have our different stories. There are certainly our lived experiences that change depending on our age, our backgrounds, our geographical locations, the places we grew up and the things we were witness to. But also, we have the commonalities that bring us strength, just like we were talking about them strong, deadly black women. Those are the commonalities that bring us together. But one of the things that also brings us that strength is this conversation about intersectionality. I don't think I need to school too many people in the room to understand what that means. But intersectionality becomes the piece of work that is left for us to dismantle in terms of the structures, the systems, and the processes that were designed not for us. They are the places where we will experience the greatest disadvantage, the deficit discourse, the discrimination, as our lives intersect in many ways through these structures and these procedures. But I want to flip that conversation a little bit to say that it is also this intersectionality that brings us to this space in time, to the sisterhood that June and many others have spoken about. But it is those places of power and influence that once marginalised, ostracised and excluded us, the places that once silenced us, are becoming smaller and smaller. Because it is our right as complex Indigenous women to change that narrative, to create it as one that is about strength, unity and uniqueness. The bonus you get is all of these layers. You know, we talk about black women and their layers. Those layers can sometimes be problematic, but most importantly, those layers make us who they are, who we are. It's our uniqueness in the space, it's what we bring, and quite frankly, some of the most amazing people on this planet are black women. And it is from that we draw that strength. So in keeping with that, there is never a dull moment in a room full of black women. And when we bring 900 of you together, I know that there will not be many dull moments. We all have some great storytellers in our groups. I think about those times that we come together. I tell you, if nothing else, you can spin a good yarn. And the best thing is, you know them yarns that get told 17 times over and they get more embellished as each person tells it? Sometimes you might hear it all in the same day and you'll be like, this is the fourth time she told that story. But every time she tells it, there's something else that brings us into this space, that makes us laugh, that makes us reflect back, and it also are the things that we remember the most. Black women might start off silent, like I said, you know, when you were flying in, sitting on that plane next to other sister girl, but not afraid, not going to say nothing, just in case you get it wrong. But inevitably, once we know who we're in the surrounds of, we find our feet, we know we're good to go. You know there's going to be laughs. You know, those big belly laughs that only black women can do, usually at public places, restaurants and other things, where everybody started looking around and you, hey, and then you go, hey, yeah, look, this mob are looking at us. But no, never mind, it's still good, you know. The silent yarns with the pursed lips, saying things without even saying things. And the big yarns that have great stature and remind us of a time and a place. I had just one of those moments this morning as all of my old footy sisters come together. I think we used to make up the scrum. The the photo of the old girls with the grey hair and the many different wrinkles now, but same time, when we looked at that photo, biggest laugh and taking us back to that time and that place. And I know that this is just the start of many good times and big conversations. So I look forward to them big laughs and those different yarns that will come from this, and reminding us that this historical event will be those yarns we tell for generations to come. So this summit has been shaped, as June said, over a course of a long period of time, built on the stories of each of you as you contribute to the conversations and the input around the country. The summit has been designed on the 4 key thematic areas that each individually are important to us: leadership, decision-making and self-determination, land, language, water and cultural rights, societal healing and well-being, economic justice and empowerment. And each of those things are something that we're all extremely passionate about. And the hardest part potentially will be making the decision about which workshop you will go into, because it's so hard to choose between one or another. But importantly, it doesn't mean you miss out on the conversations. And there's many spaces that you will be able to pick up those conversations even if you can't be in those workshops. I challenge you that one of the things that we have said for every speaker in the program is to not stay in the deficit, to not allow the disadvantaged conversation to take up all the space. That we have said this is about pushing back on that narrative, this is about flipping it on its head and talking from a position of strength and power. And I'm absolutely confident that every speaker that you'll hear from over the next couple of days will do that. I want to speak to one of those in particular, and this is something close to my heart. The one about leadership, decision-making and self-determination. If anybody knows anything about me, these are the things that I hold true. I believe self-determination is the conversation that we've been having since the early 1990s, and in many ways we've allowed other people to control what that looks like. But we are on the precipice of significant change, and as Indigenous women, we will be the people who lead that change, who create the narrative of self-determination. We will be the blueprint of what that looks like. We will be the leaders that move our people along the journey with us. The leadership of Indigenous women has been a remarkable thing and is the one that has shaped most of the historical events in this country. The history books will tell you it was the men who led these different movements, the men who led the charge. But I guarantee you that every single time there was a woman or many women who were the ones doing the work. They were the ones that were leading the change. They were the people that were delivering the community result, and the people who might not have gotten the accolades, but I'm damn sure they were the people who were making it happen. And to me, this is what leadership in action looks like. We are afforded so many things now that even when I was born in the early 70s, were not afforded to us as women. We have the right to vote. We have the right to stand for election. We have the right to participate in international advocacy. We have the right to equal wages. We have the right to pursue careers beyond being the secretary or the administrative assistant. We have come so far from the days of the typing pool and home economics, while the men got to do woodwork and carpentry, that even all of those gender lines have now been contested by the trailblazers and the people who said that this does not fit for me and I will ensure that I take that space. As Auntie Jackie has said many times before, this is also seen in the feminisation of our Indigenous leadership in this country, and I am so proud of that. I had the opportunity a few years ago to do a TED Talk. Now, if anybody knows, when you do a TED Talk, it's both daunting but also really exciting. You have to do it without notes, so that's always a bit of a challenge. But importantly, the other thing is always about post-TED Talks, how many likes do you get? So if you haven't watched my TED Talk, go and do it. But in the meantime, the other thing what I want to do is that TED Talk really framed up a conversation about where the position of Indigenous women in this country was framed. The TED Talk was my belief that Indigenous women should run this country. Now, let's just say at the time, I'm supposed to not be political, but you can tell who the Prime Minister was. And I strongly affirm that we are still in that place, even though I think that we have amazing Indigenous women in our Parliament. We also will see many more continue to grow in that space, and we will be a force to be reckoned with in the parliaments of this country, not only federally, but in our states and territories as well. So in that TED Talk, I talked about three things, because what was interesting to me is people like Lowitja O'Donoghue, people like Shirley Paisley, people like Oodgeroo Noonuccal were names that many people in this country never knew. And yet if I mentioned the names of women in the Black Civil Rights Movement, most people in this country would know who they are. And that is the problem that we have right now, is the invisibility of us in the spaces and places and the history of this nation. So I am absolutely assured that from this point on, we will create the history that is very much centred on the contribution of Indigenous women. And there are three particular traits of leadership that I reckon are important for us to remind ourselves about here today. Passion. We are a passionate people. I will tell you that we will spend our entire lives pursuing something that we are passionate about. We will not let anybody get in our way. We will not let others silence us. But also importantly, it comes from here. It comes from knowing who we are, where we have come from, the people that we have to honour along the way, but also the things that we know will inevitably change the lives of our next 3, 4, and 5 generations. And that is where we are right now. Our passion is the thing that brings us to these spaces. Our resilience as Indigenous women, I mean, come on. You know, we've all got a story to tell. We've all got a struggle, a trauma, an adversity, a moment in time. We've all been in those places where somebody's just said the wrong thing and we start biting our lip and going, not today, not today. And holding ourselves in a space so we don't become the angry black woman that everybody wants to dismiss, but the woman that can face all of that and still show up, the woman that will take the space and the woman that will mean everything that she says. And alongside that comes our courage, because we have had to show courage to be here. We have had to face those adversities, even our own fears. We have had to listen to people say exactly the same thing we said, but because they said it, somebody got it. And you'd be like, oh yeah, I just said that 10 minutes ago. You know, where were you not listening? But our courage is that we pick our battles, we know where to invest our energy, and we certainly know who to take on the journey with us. Because the most important thing that we can have is that posse of other black women who stand next to us and beside us and behind us. And sometimes they're the ones we don't even know. but we know that somewhere we've made a difference in their lives, and they are sending that moral support for the things that we face every day. So these are the kinds of traits that I think, hey, look out. I had to time myself, but anyways. I told you about black woman and a microphone. Lucky I'm down to my last few notes, but anyway. But you know, these are the traits that I think are that commonality that I was talking about before. They are the things that make us and shape us. They are the intersections of our lives that contribute to our value and to our purpose. And I hope that the summit this week is going to provide you lots of opportunities to show up, to be courageous, to talk about what you're passionate about, but more importantly, to be in the space to hear your voices and to share your thoughts. I do want to acknowledge that there are a couple of women in this room, or those that couldn't be with us, but it would be remiss of me to not mention them in particular. I've already quoted Auntie Jackie, but of course the first time I picked up Sister Girl, I was blown away. And she's heard me talk about this many times. I'm like, hey, this woman been in my head. I was just thinking that. Sadly, I didn't write it, but I certainly have relived it many times over, quoting all of the things in her book, in particular the one about understanding that sometimes we can't accept that all women are our allies, and that sometimes it is other women who also cause levels of oppression against us. Yeah? But again, this is about knowing who's in our corner and who are the people that we want to work alongside. Jackie Huggins has been there in some of the most traumatic times of my life. She has provided the guidance and direction absolutely necessary to pick myself up, to dust myself off, and to move on to the next stage. So I thank you very much, Auntie Jackie, for that. Other people, of course, Auntie Pat Turner, Kerry Tim, and I'd get big growl if I didn't also acknowledge Auntie Graceland Smallwood up in North Queensland, who couldn't be with us, but you know, that's the place where those political seeds were sown, and she continues to remind us every day of the work she's done and that there's no way you're silencing her anytime soon. So in closing, I just want to remind ourselves that we are, as Auntie June has already said, we are the grandmothers and the aunties and the mothers and the sisters and the friends. I was kind of laughing when you read that out. I was like, she saw my notes. But you know, that's who we are in these spaces. We will have relationships with each other over generations and time. It could be years between seeing each other, but we pick it up like it was just yesterday. And we will think about what is the legacy of Indigenous women in this country. So for every one of us, there is something that we get to leave behind. There's a story to tell, and there are the generations that come after us that will be the ones that talk about us, what we did, when we did it, and how powerful it was in changing their future. As I said, I'm extremely pleased to be the co-host of this summit. I'm so happy to guide this conversation, and I'm so happy that I get to stand in this moment. As Auntie Leela Watson said, and generally this was directed at non-Indigenous people at the time, but she said, if you have come to help, you are wasting your time. But if you have come because your liberation is bound together in mind, let us walk together. And I think that that's as profound as it was intentional for the non-Indigenous people in the room, but also important for the sisters in this room as we recognise our liberations being bound together, our capability to walk as one, and to remind ourselves that we are the ones that we've been waiting for. We are the change.
You can absolutely see why those two amazing women were chosen to co-host this incredible summit. Please join me again in thanking them both for their wisdom, for their guidance, and for their leadership. We could not be in safer hands with them and also with each other. They've talked to us about power and standing in our power. They've talked to us about interconnectedness. And I just want to take a moment before we go to morning tea to focus on that for a second. Put up your hands if you know someone else in the room. Keep your hands raised if you are sitting next to the people you know. Oh, yeah? Interesting. Now keep your hands raised again if you are committed to making sure that you meet other women in this space over the next few days. Wonderful. As we break for morning tea, I give you this little piece of homework. Find 3 people that you do not already know and together answer 3 questions with each other. Who are you? Who's your mob and where you're from? And how did you get here? And I don't mean, I got that plane, but that thing was late. No good. Tried to drive down, but it started to snow because Canberra. I mean, what has brought you to be sitting in this room with all of these other amazing women for these 3 days? Who are you? Who's your mob? Where you're from? How did you get here? So find 3 women over morning tea and do that with each other. But for the moment, you ready up there? And are you ready down here? We have a little dancing exercise for you. So if you can stand, I invite you to stand. And for the next 3 minutes, we're going to get our groove on together. Everybody, if you can stand, I encourage you to do so. If you are sitting, you can still move.
Just be